Hi everyone, it's Sue Plumb here to share my latest scrapbook process video with you. Today's layout that I am sharing was created for the Challenge Me, Challenge You series that I do with my dear friend Gwen Wruck every month here on YouTube. Now each month Gwen and I choose a criteria for each other, which could be a product, a tool, a technique, and then we challenge each other to create something using both of those criteria. So this month I have chosen retro photo and Gwen has chosen chipboard. So both of us have to combine these things and create something to wow the other with. Now I have a photo there. So I loosely use the term retro photo. This could be a vintage photo, so it could be something old, something of your grandparents. This retro photo is a photo of my sister and I. It was probably taken 40 plus years ago, so late 70s there. And I decided that the colours in this photo would pair beautifully with the Wild at Heart collection from Cocoa Vanilla Studio. I had a bit of this left in my stash. As you can see, I flicked through there. I had quite a bit of leftover chipboard from this one. So there was a couple of incomplete chipboard sheets there, and I also had a stack of chipboard frames, and I thought, well, while I was working with leftovers, I might as well work with scraps as well. So I had a pile of leftover papers there that were all in scraps. So let's get stuck into this layout. Now, I decided to create a mixed media layout, but I wasn't really in the mood for mess for this one. So I thought I might work with my distress oxides and work with a clean technique. So I pulled out my little foam blenders there. So you can see the colors I'm working with. I've got spun sugar and tumbled glass. So pink and blue to work with the colors of our clothes in the photo. And as I said, I've got my foam blenders. Now, it's just a matter of getting these foam blending pads wet with ink. I actually think I might need to re-ink my spun sugar pad. It's starting to get a little dry. So you will see that once I start to use this technique on the page there, I'm going to speed it right up so as not to bore you with watching me blend this ink on the background. So my goal with this background was just to add some really, really subtle colour, which was the reason that I chose these two shades, which are two of the lightest shades of Distress Oxides. And I also chose this technique because it gives you a really, really subtle result. Now, you'll see with my technique there that when I'm going in with the ink, I'm starting in the centre of the page and I'm blending outwards, because you'll note that when you're foam blender hits the page, the first time it hits the page, you tend to get that little circular mark there. And I knew that all of these were going to be hidden by the majority of the layout, which was under the center. So it was really only what was going to be blended out towards the edges that was going to be visible on the final result. So I pulled in a handful of those scrap papers there, and I'm really just going to have a look to see what's going to work with the colours in the photos. And I'm kind of going for what I term a messy stack. But there's no other way to describe it. I'm just looking for lots of little bits and pieces that I can layer up in the background just to add lots of visual interest with a combination of patterns. And that's all I'm doing, is just looking for ways for me to use up those scraps. So you'll see that the way that I do this is I just layer the scraps up. I'm looking for an arrangement that's pleasing to my eye before I set about fixing them down onto the page. So I've got all sorts of little bits and pieces. Some of them were left over from the cut apart page. Some of them were actual just leftover pieces of pattern paper that I'd used on other projects. I did decide with one of these pieces, you can see that I'm doing here, I used a large tag just as a template, and I just cut the top of it into that tag shape, and it was my intention to add in a little bit of twine or string or something to add some texture to the page. So you'll see that I have gone in with a coloured doily there. I've actually got two on my desk. I was tossing up colours. I didn't know whether I wanted to go with pink or go with blue. You can see I've got the pink sitting in there. Now I'm switching it out. I had to decide which of those two I wanted to go with. I decided there was enough of the pink colours in the background pieces of paper So in the end, I stuck with the blue just to help give that pop of blue underneath my photo, which, you know, a lot of it ends up getting covered up by other things, but you'll see that as we progress. So I figured out a sort of rough arrangement for my papers, and now before I secure anything down on the page, I'm just looking for some of the chipboard frames that I might like to work with and seeing how that will work in with the arrangement of the papers before I go ahead and secure anything to the page. Now, you'll see that when I do secure things to the page, I did try and straighten some bits and pieces up here. I pulled out my T-square. I wasn't looking for perfectly straight on every piece of paper because I knew there was going to be a stack of elements going over the top, but I did want to keep things relatively straight before I go in with my long arm stapler just to staple everything down onto the page. Now, you'll see that that little bottom one there actually got missed in the stapling, so I've tucked it back in, I've added the doily on top, and now that's secured as well. Now, I do find this is the easiest technique. When you've got a stack of papers like that to secure to your page, don't mess about putting glue in between different layers and all of that sort of thing. Just use good old staples. Bam, straight through the page. Everything's attached. If you want to go through and add some extra glue or whatever, you can, but none of those staples are visible in the final product, and none of them are going to poke out or cause any issues. So now, I have had a question before, have I ever had a problem with my staples rusting? No, I have not. Not that I've particularly gone back through layouts from 10 years ago looking to see if the staples have rusted, because quite frankly, I don't see any of them. Obviously, the staples that are going through the top side of the layer have been covered up with other things, and then my layouts have been popped into albums anyway, and they sit back to back with another page, so you never see the staples. So frankly, if there was a tiny bit of surface rust, which I haven't seen, it wouldn't bother me. Okay, moving on. So now I'm looking at those chipboard frames, and I don't tend to use chipboard frames in terms of framing a photo and cutting it down to size and using it as an actual frame around the photos. I tend to use them exactly like this, which is as an additional layer or element in the background, just to add, like you can see that I've got all of those square rectangular type shapes going on, and really placing these chipboard frames over the top just emphasizes all those shapes, and it just helps add more interest to the page. So all of those chipboard frames I actually adhered down using my Helmer 450 glue. I would recommend that you not use your normal sort of adhesive, that you go for something a little bit stronger simply because of the weight of those chipboard frames, and over time I'm sure you don't want them coming loose from the page. Okay, as I said, I've also added a little bit of string to that frame tag that I created at the top there. So a little bit of pink string I've just added on, and that just adds a bit of texture to the page. I've also added in some frayed gauze for texture. And now what I'm going and doing is adding in these little floral pieces. So I had a little leftover piece of pattern paper that had these watercolor florals printed on it. What I did was I just fussy cut out a few of them, and I'm just adding them in. So I've gone with 3 little clusters of florals, just like I've gone with 3 chipboard frames. And you can see that I am placing those to create that visual triangle around my photo, just as I did with the chipboard frames. So if you have a look where the chipboard frames are placed, and you draw a line between each of them, one at the top, one on the left, one on that bottom right corner, you will see the triangle that they make, that the photo falls within that triangle. Now you will see where I've placed the 3 floral clusters. So the top left corner, sort of on the right hand side, and down the bottom. Again, if you trace that, that is the secondary visual triangle, and it just helps emphasize and frame around that photo. Because when the eye travels around the page, the eye is naturally seeking out similar elements. So if you travel from one flower, your eye's naturally going to travel to the next flower, and as you travel around in that triangle on the page, it helps bring your focal point, which of course is your photo, to the fore and bring it up to the eye. All right, what I just did there was I grabbed a little bit of scrap cardboard and I'm just cutting a few little pieces and fitting them in around where those chipboard frames sit, just to give a little bit of stability behind the photo before I go sticking it down. I needed a flat surface to be able to stick that photo to. Now, ordinarily, I put this scrap cardboard on the back of my photo before I put the photo down on the layout. But as I had to have these chipboard frames sitting underneath, I needed to wait and see where I had to stick that scrap cardboard to provide the flat surface for the photo. All right, next element. So now we're actually moving on to those chipboard sheets. Now, as I said, it was my goal to use up whatever I could from these. I'm quite pleased that I already got 3 chipboard frames down on the page. So now I'm looking for a few of those little pieces. They've just, like, there's a heart there. Which, you know, I had to find the right position for. There's a few little phrases. I've got that little ticket there that says lovely that I've placed in next to the photo. There was this little banner piece that says the best, and it was also like that wood grain print, the same as that captured frame at the top there. And I was really looking for the ideal position to place this to balance off those 2 wood grain pieces against one another. Okay, I also, what else did I have in the chipboard sheet? I had that large butterfly. Now, you're going to see me move this large butterfly around a bit because, as I said, I like to work with the rule of 3s. So, knowing that I was going to be using that large butterfly, I was naturally going to balance that off with a couple of other butterflies. And knowing where I was going to place those 3 butterflies to create that balance and harmony, I hadn't quite yet figured out. I then got distracted, as you do, with that handmade heart embellishment that I've placed next to the photo, because I had also pulled out a few other little things from the Wild at Heart collection that you can see in the bowl there, because I figured if I'm going to work with this collection, why not try and use up a few other things? So I had that Bloom and Grow flare button, which I just layered on top of that handmade heart embellishment, which is from Charms Creations. I'll put links to all of this stuff that I've used down below so that if you want to go over and have a look, you can. Obviously, this collection, Wild at Heart, is no longer available from Cocoa Vanilla Studio because this was a bit of a stash busting exercise from a collection from years ago. But you can, if you wanted to use this sort of design, you could certainly replicate this with whatever you have on hand. It's not a difficult thing at all. So, to balance out that large butterfly, which I finally settled on placing there, I had to cut out 2 small paper butterflies, which I just fussy cut from one of those scraps of paper that I had left. And I'm just looking for the ideal position to place them. Now, I really did want to place one at the bottom of my photo simply because my sister's the sole of her shoe is that sort of big black dot at the bottom of the photo, and my eye kept going to it. So I figured if I had placed one of the butterflies there, it would help to cover that up in the photo and distract away from that big black dot. And then sort of once I had those 2 butterflies in place, I had to place the 3rd to continue that visual triangle. So again, while you're looking at that, create that imaginary line between those 3 butterflies and you'll see that I have created yet another visual triangle around the photo. Now, on the corner of the photo, there is also a little rubber charm that was left over from this collection. And that was about it, other than a bit of splatter. So the Distress Oxide I used at the end here is called Victorian Velvet. And the reason I chose that was not only because of the colour, but also because my sister has a velvet collar on the dress she is wearing, and I thought that might be appropriate. So there you have it. I am quite happy that I did manage to bust through quite a bit of chipboard and got this super cute photo of my sister and I from 40 plus years ago scrapped. And that was my layout. Thanks so much for watching. I'll put the link to Gwen's video down below, so make sure you pop over and see what she did with this criteria as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.